Welcome to What CEOs Talk About. Do you wonder what CEOs talk about behind closed doors? How they bring their vision to reality? How do they overcome and succeed through adversity? We share that and so much more with each episode. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, everybody. My name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate vision into frontline operations. Today, Dan Abbate. So in the pre-show, I always ask my guests, what do you do? How do I introduce yourself? Dan just went and goes, I don't know. Here's all the stuff that I do. So Dan, the best person to introduce yourself is yourself. So Dan, what is it? Who are you? What do you do?
Awesome. Hey, Martin, thanks for having me on, by the way. My name is Dan, as you said. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started at 14 working in my dad's manufacturing company up through we'll get into all the stories from there. But at this point, I'm mostly an investor advisor. At this point, I'm involved in 16, 17 different companies on a weekly basis that I'm advising or I'm invested in. And I'm always just having fun helping other entrepreneurs find their way and find their journey and maybe just kind of pay back all the good stuff that was done, for me to the next generation, basically.
Fabulous. Thank you. Dan has got a really cool, I don't know a lot of people that have this really interesting fact. So Dan, how about you let it loose?
So I was homeschooled from fifth grade through high school. Yeah. I went to college at 15, moved into the dorms at 15. That was fun.
Oh, damn!
was graduated just a few years later with my first degree. And then I've been kind of in school and academia ever since. And then from this point today, I still have a 20-year plan that includes multiple master's degrees and a couple PhDs over the next, like I said, 20 years, because I've been in academia my whole life. Not as an academic per se, but just as someone who's from a place of love of learning and then sharing that learning anytime I get a chance, whether in the academic setting or in the real world, or, I'm a
modern philosopher.
That's right. Wandering philosopher. I'm a wandering philosopher. I learn where I can, and I meet and I learn from other people. That's what I do.
Yeah, I love to dive down deep. So there's a lot of things that there's the Freemasons out there. There's Stoicism that's out there. There's a lot of philosophies out there that we've lost touch with a lot of things that it's important to understand. People laugh at me when I go, it is true to be or not to be. It's, a lot of people have a hard time with that. Oh, you're just being ridiculous. But it is true. Like, what is being? How does it work? How do I live my life according to that motto? Anyways.
The thing that I find interesting about that is that we could probably go on this subject forever, is that philosophy as a subject has been around for as long as humans have been trying to write stuff down, right? And it's all true. From thousands of years ago, you can read it, and it applies today because it's still true, and it's been true. And we might argue over some of the nuances, but for the most part, the human experience is still the same human experience from 5,000 years ago, and it's going to be the same 5,000 years later. The details change, but it's all still there. So that's why it's so important to be aware of how you live your life and what direction you're going, because you make those choices yourself. At the end of the day, it all comes from inside. It's
simple choice. Absolutely. So what do you mean that way back when in the caveman, bonking people on the head was not good? So bonking people on the head today is still not good.
somebody back when they were bonking someone on the head was questioning, well, why am I bonking this person on the head? Do I really want to be bonking? Is this my true path? Like, this is where I want to go.
Oh my goodness. We can go on for purpose. A lot of people, they say, oh, I need to find my purpose and all the good stuff. You just be a good human being. Just start with that. Just start with that.
Be happy. Do the things that make you happy.
Agreed. So with that being said, let's, in the pre-show, we discussed what the title of the show would be today. I think it is absolutely fabulous. And I think we're going to have to cap it because, we can go on for hours on this one. So Dan, what is the title of the show?
The title of our show is Finding Your Path, how to listen to yourself.
So please tell us your path. Let's go dive down deep in who Dan. Back in, you're a young man, so back in 1980,
I was
1970.
born in 1980.
Oh, nice! Look, right on the money.
Yeah, I'm an old millennial, I guess you would say, or a young Gen Xer.
Yeah.
So right in the middle. So I didn't belong in either group, maybe. All right. So yeah. So I mean, if we just want to like kind of jump into the story, my path has always been about doing it different.
Okay.
Even if like even as a kid, I always had kind of a struggle in the irony of it is I struggled a lot in school, not because it wasn't like the reason I struggled was because it didn't work for me. The format didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't like to sit in a desk and be taught these things in this way that just didn't work for me. I didn't enjoy it. And I was bored. And then when I'm bored, I have a
trouble.
Exactly. Nothing big, just kind of mischievous sort of stuff. But But anyway, so pre-K, kindergarten, all that stuff at the beginning, and then around 5th grade, we were like, okay, let's try homeschooling, which we don't even to this day, my family doesn't even know how they got that idea of where they even heard about that. Because back in that time, this was like 90-ish, I guess, 89, 90, something like that. It really wasn't a mainstream thing. There was like people did it for religious reasons, and then other people did it for other reasons, I guess. But we did it for other reasons. We just did it like, hey, let's try it. It worked really well for me. I plugged along, had fun, learned about computers at that point. Like that was kind of really when I dove into my computer kind of journey. And I do have a lot of coding and technology background. Like I mentioned earlier, by the time I was 14, I was working in my dad's office, sitting next to his CFO, because that was the safest place for me that I wasn't going to. He had a big manufacturing company, it's like, sit by the finance.
Don't go sticking your hand in the processing machine. Right?
Okay, so sit by the finance guy. So I sat with the finance guy. So I learned about how finance works, which was in retrospect like a phenomenal thing to have that experience at such a young age. They were doing a lot of acquisitions at the time, so I was learning about what it meant to acquire a company and how you consolidate the company, how you kind of evaluate the income statement and balance sheet, and what the merged companies would look like. So very early, these are the things I'm experiencing. And I'm loving it, right? Like it's like I'm learning all this stuff. And then like when I was in college, while I was in college, I started a website which was focused on, it was called Advanced Mnemonics. And Advanced Mnemonics was essentially an aggregator of traffic, which I sold to Wall Street funded companies. So remember, this is like the middle 90s now.
Mid-90s, yeah.
Mid-90s, right? So all the wallstreet.com stuff is going crazy. People are spending money on everything that just has .com in the title. And so all those people had to justify their big paydays, right? That they got all this money.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that everyone was held accountable to was traffic, was hits. Like, did you get more hits than you did, quote unquote hits? That's what he's called. Hits than you did last week. So I was an aggregator of traffic, and I would just sell traffic to these people. And then after a couple of years of that, I was bought out by one of those people about 6 months before the .com crash. And then the guy who bought the company that bought it.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, right. Total luck. So that's part of my journey. You have to have a little luck, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right. So I had a little bit of luck there. At that point, my dad was just closing up his business because after years of a challenging decade, basically, of trying to acquire, because everything in his industry, not everything, but lots, was moving to China at that time.
Gotcha.
So all the American manufacturers, so I got to experience that at a young age, which was not positive. It was a positive experience in retrospect because I learned and I saw.
Yeah, learning experience, but it wasn't fun. It
wasn't fun. Right. At 17 years old, I was still helping in and out of my dad's place throughout that whole time. And I just kind of watched the deterioration of, the company from a revenue perspective, which of course in manufacturing, you have a lot of overhead, hard to keep it going. And so I saw kind of all that. I saw the morale start to go down. I saw my dad's own internal struggles with the whole thing, obviously. There were times where I was on the phone with vendors like who are like, hey, you haven't paid us in 120 days. When are you going to pay us? And there's like, we don't know. So I got that whole experience. So I've had the really high and the really low of entrepreneurship, kind of like all in the same few year period.
As a teenager too, not as an adult, as a teenager.
Yeah.
When you're the most influential.
Yes, exactly. So it's funny that you bring that up. When you're being influenced by what you're experiencing at that time, and it's kind of like setting your adult perspective, right?
Correct.
So my entrepreneurial career after that was very jaded. Maybe that's a good word, because we're talking about finding your path and going down a different way you go. My path was, there was a little, I didn't know it at the time, but I know it in retrospect now. Because I had that experience of a really good win, and then also watching some really not so fun stuff in the manufacturing place, in my dad's place. Once I sold that, my dad closed his place. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I didn't need to do anything in particular at that exact moment because I had a little bit of money. So I thought, well, I'm going to go back to my academics. And I did math and physics at the University of New Mexico, just for the fun of it. Like, I'll do this for a couple of years. Started doing that.
And you pick, I just want to do something fun. Let me pick math.
Yeah. So we were, by the way, I'm from Chicago. That's where all this was happening. I grew up in Chicago. So moving to New Mexico was kind of cool and fun and different. So moved to New Mexico, math and physics, just doing that for a while. Couple of years of that. And then got back into the kind of the entrepreneurial world with the idea that I'm going to acquire companies and apply my technology and automation kind of experience to them to improve their, to optimize their processes, improve cash flow, and then sell at a higher multiple, or at least the same, even if it's the same multiple, higher cash flow with applied to the same multiple is more value. Go for it. That was the model, right? So I did that. Started it in New Mexico, but actually ended up back in Chicago doing that from basically 2003-ish through 2013. I did it 8 times, acquired companies, and then put myself in charge as CEO, made all the changes, and then immediately tried to sell them. So for the most part, it was kind of one company at a time, but mostly sometimes there was some overlap. And by 2013 now, you have to remember, it's 10 years. So at that point, I got married, I had a kid, I'd been through mostly good. 6 of the 8 were quite profitable deals. One of them was kind of a break even, and one of them was a stinker. So on average, did pretty well in that 10-year period.
6 out of 8. That's good. Yeah, that's a good deal. Yeah,
that's good odds. So 2013. Now you have to remember, when you do that kind of work that I was doing, this is where the jaded part comes in, right? You're not the most likable person on the planet. Right? So,
that's a nice way of saying it.
Right? So now these are things that had to be fixed, right?
Yeah, of course.
To this day, I still justify it that way. Like, the companies needed to do this in order to be competitive and to grow and be better. But in the process, you shake the status quo. Again, I've never been a person for that, hey, it has to be done this way because it's always been done this way. Let's change it. Let's make it better. And that's a hard role to play over and over and over again, especially when people are potentially losing their jobs, or just the whole change management is always difficult, as we all know.
That is, that's where a lot of people say, oh, numbers. People are not first. You don't put profit first. You say, okay, well, I always give the analogy of a ship. So if you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and if you don't take care of that boat, then you're going to sink. And there's not going to be one person left on that boat who's going to survive. A company is no different. It provides a life support system. So the company is the boat that gets you from one place to another, and there's a whole bunch of people on it. Your number one priority is to take care of that boat. Now, you treat people with kindness and dignity and respect, and that's key of creating a circle of safety. It is never, profit over people. It's to say, well, the ship's rinky-dink. You get this, got a leak here. It's got this. You got to fix the mast. You got to do this. You got to work hard to get that. And if somebody is not critical to that, to which a decision was made prior to your arrival, then that hard conversation, it needs to be had. And it's not your decision that was initially made, is that that person who hired you in the first place did not understand the economics of prosperity.
That's right.
Because everybody aims to be prosperous, right? So you go profit plus sustainability equals prosperity. Everybody wants to be prosperous. You work Monday to Friday so that you can have Saturday, Sunday off. You work 200 days out of a year so that you can have 3 weeks off in holidays, right? So a lot of people don't, that's the philosopher in me, I guess, thinks about the whole bigger item. So sorry for interrupting, but I think that was a very valuable lesson for people to hear that. Like you're not an asshole on purpose.
Right.
You're just saying,
like, that's all my no, but it's a perspective thing, right? It's you're totally right in what you're saying. So the circumstances that led up to me acquiring that company and making the changes that I did, like you said, happened well before I even knew the company existed.
Mm-hmm.
And now the change is happening. And of course, how you deal with that as an individual person, whether you're an employee or a management person or like wherever you are in the organization,
mm-hmm.
is some people are better at handling it than others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if it isn't a risk to their job, but just the fact that something is changing and they have
mm-hmm.
to behave in a different way. And of course, as we all know, culture plays a big role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like certain companies you go into had a more flexible and kind of better culture to do that with than another
mm-hmm.
culture, right? When you go into the next company. So I did all that and I learned all that and I experienced all that. But for the most part, it was a struggle for me because I didn't, all I knew was watching my dad's manufacturing company, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then my tech company, which was kind of like a antithesis sort of situation. But for whatever reason, that when I molded myself in those teenage years, as you
mm-hmm.
pointed out and described, I really attached my vision, not my vision, my expectations
mm-hmm.
of entrepreneurship on that hard struggle that I saw in my dad's time
mm-hmm.
versus the tech thing. It's interesting because I had both next to each other,
mm-hmm.
but for some reason I stayed focused on this one. So I went into every deal assuming it was going to be painful. And wouldn't you know, a lot of times it was. Even when it was
mm-hmm.
successful, it was still a painful process for me. So in 2013, after the last one, I had a bunch of real estate in Chicago as well. And so and I said to my wife, I'm like, why are we in Chicago? We don't go to an office. We've always mostly worked. Whenever I wasn't going to a business for some reason, we were in our house. Our house was always our office at some point in the equation. So I said, why are we in Chicago? All we have is this real estate. Let's go to Florida. So 2013, what am I going to do next? Because I don't want to continue to do it the way I'm doing it. How do I do it a different way? And I decided, I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to do something for the first time that I had not done in my whole career up to that point. And that was listen to other people.
Oh,
right. So it's interesting because in my kind of academic world, I was always very open to listening to people and learning from others and people who've studied and done these different things. But in my entrepreneur world, I was very much like, I know it. I can, and I'm successful because I can work harder than everybody else. I can, I can do whatever needs to be done to make it happen. And that was my approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need anybody else to give me any clues, right? I can do everything. Although after doing that for so many years, I was tired of it. I just knew I didn't like that anymore. Like maybe there's a way. And so same thing like I did when I went to University of New Mexico. I went to Florida, here in Florida, and I moved and I started meeting every entrepreneur that I could. Mm-hmm. And honestly, South Florida is fantastic from an entrepreneurial perspective because we're like a big melting pot of people. We have Europe, we have people from South America, we have every state, people come here. And now, especially now more than ever, we've got everybody here as well. So it was a great choice, and to come down here. And I within a couple of months of being here, I'd met, people about where I was at. I met people who are hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in terms of their net worth or their businesses that they've run or whatever it is. So I got a great perspective. And then a couple of years of that, kind of retooled my structure to kind of focus on, all right, I need to remove myself from the actual operations, because I quickly identified that I don't want to be in the operations anymore. Like I can't put myself into the day-to-day immediately like I always did. So how do I do that? Well, one idea was, I'm going to talk about some of my other kind of failures.
That's all right. That's all right. I mean, it's still on our title, right? So finding your path, how to listen to yourself, right? So
yes.
It's culminating. I can feel it.
It is. Trust me, we're getting to the exact point. So anyway, okay, cool. So I identified I want to remove myself from that day-to-day operation, but I still want to have some sort of similar structure because the structure worked well and I made money and I liked it. I was excited, like certain aspects I was really excited about. So I started essentially what was a technology company, but the focus was, instead of implementing the automation and technology into a company that I acquired, I would just make the investment into other people's companies and then take back my value out of the value that we created by making them more efficient. That was the model. It didn't work so well because after a couple of deals, I realized that when I owned the company and I implemented these processes, because remember how we said change management and all that sucks? It sucks even more when you don't have any power.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You have no power.
Like this other side thing. So we tried that a couple of times, had a little bit of success, but obviously was not going to be the scaled approach that I was looking for. So kind of pushed that aside. In the short, so that was a couple year effort. And a couple hundred or more, how much? I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 in cost on that little experiment.
So just pause for a sec, because there's a huge lesson here. Because I think, Dan, you've said that I pushed that aside, right?
Yes.
So a lot of people will not give up. They go, oh, a little bit more, more. And that's the curse of some of these entrepreneurs that we have. We go, I can do more work. Let me throw more work at it. Let me see if I put more hours into this. Oh, let me put in an extra 50,000. And then all of a sudden you're $1.2 million. You're working 18 hours a day. You don't see your wife. You don't see your kids. You're going, okay, it's too late. So you have to put that line in the sand that says, if I've invested $300,000 into this and have not seen this return, or if I exceed this amount of hours per week, I'm pulling the plug. And so many entrepreneurs are afraid of doing that.
That's correct. That's
correct.
Go ahead. It's even worse. I think it's not getting better, that little scenario you just described, because now over the last, let's say 5 years or so, entrepreneurship has kind of become a buzzword in kind of regular culture. And as such, regular culture has presented this idea of this, like, well, you just grind it out and you work and you work. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because if you look at the research shows that the number one contributing factor to success of a company is timing.
Correct.
It's not work. It's not people. It's not how much money you have. It's literally timing. So if you're just not timed right, like if your product market fit is not there at the time that you're doing it, you're kind of doomed to fail. Like you can maybe work it long enough that maybe that eventually that timing starts to align, possibly, or you might be on the backside of it. And you'll just be grinding forever. You're not going to get anywhere. So, my recommendation on that is, and I got this from Jeff Hoffman, who is the founder of Priceline, among other many successful ventures. I asked him once. I said, "How do you know when to quit?" And because he's telling me all his great success, right? I said, okay, that's great, but I'm sure you had some that didn't work. How did you know when to quit? And he said, when you're out of ideas. Oh. So like, if you're out of, like, if you feel like, oh, I got another idea, yeah, no problem. And the ideas are coming easy to try. But if you get to that point where you're like out of ideas and you're just grinding, trying to, like, that's when you quit. And so I took that really, I internalized that a lot of like, I'm not going to grind. Like, that's what I used to do, is grind it out. Like, just like.
for me, the social media, especially on LinkedIn, some of these posts, they go, oh yeah, just hard work, don't make decisions, don't think about it, don't kill yourself and just work hard. That's what entrepreneurs do. Just no, no, no. I mean, we know EO, entrepreneurial organization. We've both worked, Dan, with a lot of entrepreneurs. And for those who are watching, I'm just going to go and do something that says, oh, shiny thing.
Right.
Oh, shiny
Yeah.
thing. Oh,
Right.
EOS. Oh, scaling up. Oh, and don't get me wrong. I love Gino. I love both of those systems. Don't get me wrong. I'm not shooting them down. Far from it. They're just, what's the next thing? Oh, I'm a learner. I want to learn more. I want to devour this. They're not intentional in their activities and or their learning. They're just consuming to consume, which is not correct. And I think that your approach of understanding your philosophy, where do you sit? And you're very specific. You said, well, let's go math and physics. I'm sure that there was a thought process of reason why you chose that. I don't think that you just said, oh, I'm just going to do math and physics. I think that there was a thought process behind it.
If you want to know the why, and this maybe going back to like a Simon Sinek sort of thing, why?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, what was my personal why with that particular example? Because that stuff was intellectually interesting to me and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good enough why.
I agree.
I think a lot of times, especially in entrepreneurship, sometimes we have to have like this deeper reasoning for things. And honestly, and even as just human beings, I believe that human beings need to focus on what works for them and what makes them happy and what makes them like engaged and what makes them want to get up in the morning. Like, you've heard that phrase a million times, but like, what makes you want to get up in the morning? And not like, I want to save the world, not like a 50-year thing, but each day, what's going to get you up in the morning? Because sometimes because I think that's the fallacy. We hear this, what's going to get you up in the morning? Well, it's because I'm going to save the world 15 years from now. Okay, but now you're stuck in that problem. If you've gone down the wrong path, it's going to take you 15 years to realize you went down the wrong path, right? Because you set it it's too far. Like, it's okay to have that, and you should have those 15-year things, but you also have to know each day what gets you up in the morning, and what makes you feel happy each day, and what makes you feel content each day. Doesn't have to be easy, doesn't have to be like stress-free, but you need to be content, and you have to feel the future while still being content in your present.
Oh,
right?
There's so many people out there. Like Ryan McKenzie is one of the co-founders of True Earth. It's the little tabs. So instead of the detergent, it's a little piece of kind of paper. So instead of using the plastic, so he was just sitting as kids. And for the listeners, listen to Ryan's episode here. It's pretty cool. And he's like, I saw an opportunity, and he said, kind of like, here's, we're going to pitch it. And if we do this, he was really good at understanding D2C and online. So he's like, but now he's like going, holy crap. We have, through this little thought process that we had, which was very simple. I don't want my kids to live in plastic. It's not ginormous. He didn't say, well, I want to save the entire planet. But he realized after a year of being in business, I can't remember the official number, but if you stacked, regular kind of detergent components or the jugs themselves, it went from the earth to the moon and back like 16 times. Like that's a lot of detergent bins, right? So then, Felix from Chop Value, he was eating at, I can't remember, it was an Asian restaurant with chopsticks. He's like, oh, he's an engineer. So he's like, now he recycles, he gets all these chopsticks from people that are there, and he makes tables and he makes, woodwork and blah. But he didn't say, I'm going to do this. To your point that the timing, oh, wait, here's a very, I don't want to use the word fickle because it's not fickle, but a light idea, right? It's not an in-depth, I'm going to be very specific about it. People about Steve Jobs and the iPad, he was looking at his hand. He's like, we need to use this as a tool. And that was the foundation of a lot of touch screens and all that good stuff. So anyways, sorry, I thought it was a good learning experience to say, hey, that's really key what you're saying, Dan, about not having to dive down deep. And just what makes you happy. Just think about that.
Yeah. Start there because it's really going to be a combination of all these other external forces that are going to determine your success or failure. So you might as well enjoy the process along the way. And honestly, I think you're more likely to be successful if you're in your what do they call it? I think it's where do they call that? In The Big Leap. There's a book called Big Leap by Gay Hendricks that talks about your zone of excellence versus your zone of genius.
Oh.
And zone of excellence are the things that you're good at and you can do really well. That's where I was, with those 8 companies. Yeah. But your zone of genius is really where you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing. You enjoy it. It's coming naturally. It's easy. It's not a struggle, all that. A lot of people stay very focused on their zone of excellence. And realistically, the best parts of life come out of your zones of genius, and the best production, the best output comes from that place. And so discovering what that zone of genius is super important, because if you're an entrepreneur, this is another thing that I've noticed over the years. Entrepreneurship is never about what you think it's about. We introduce ourselves and we tell people about what our company does. Mm-hmm. We say, well, my company, we change oil in cars, we have an oil change place. Well, is your job really the changing of the oil, or is it how efficiently you can acquire customers to come in and get their oil changed? Mm-hmm. Going back to the theory of constraints kind of idea. Mm-hmm. You're changing the oil is the easy part. Anybody can do that. The person who wins is the person who can most efficiently get the people in to get the oil changed.
Correct.
That's the constraint. That's your job as the CEO, is to focus on that point and all of your attention consistently on that element, or whatever the element is for your particular business. So if you introduce yourself to somebody, you should not say what your company does. You should say what your company's constraint is, because that's really what you manage.
That is beautiful. That is a huge learning.
Yeah, that's what you manage. You manage your constraint, and that's your job at the highest level in the whole company. Focus on the constraint, because the rest of it anyone could do. Right?
Yeah.
So, So anyway, I learned all that stuff. I kind of went down that path of trying that with the technology company. Then we started a micro PE company, which we kind of as all of the cryptocurrency and tokenization of securities was kind of moving along in 2017, 2018. We did an SEC approved token offering to do a micro private equity group where we were going to buy companies and put CEOs in place, do all that. And we did do that. We did that somewhat successfully, but again, not scalable. And I looked at it and I said to myself, why do I keep finding myself in this exact same position? Because even going back to my early days of my career, I kept thinking of the constraint, for example. Mm-hmm. I kept envisioning the company and the constraint being essentially the sales process, right? Because I'm not a sales. I don't enjoy cold calling. I really don't enjoy trying to convince anyone of anything. Mm-hmm. And I know that if sales are right, you don't have to do that. But the sales process was always stressful for me, and I didn't like it. And I always identified it as the thing I will always have to do, and no matter what situation. So in now we're getting really right up to the day.
We're getting to the comment.
Here it goes. Yeah, 2019, right? Fall of 2019. Y'all know it's coming, right? So fall of 2019, I did another kind of a self-evaluation, which I highly recommend to everyone.
Yes.
Because if you do need to stop and really do a kind of a self-reflection kind of thing, and really decide what's important to you. What are the things that you believe about the world that aren't true, right? Because 90% of the stuff that we're believing are probably not true. We just made it up.
So good, yeah.
Just believe something else. So, my biggest example of believe something else was, I said, I'm not going to believe that I have to worry about sales anymore, making sales.
Yeah.
I just decided to stop believing that. I believe that forever. And I'm just going to stop believing that. I'm just going to not think about that at all. and I'm going to focus on the part of the world that I like the best. And I said, well, what is that? And I said, and all I said was, I actually very much enjoy meeting people like we are right now, having these kind of philosophical dialogues. Let me start there. So in about the fall of 2019, I started doing walk and talks, which I don't know if I invented that or if my version of a walk and talk. Anyway, my version I invented. My version of a walk and talk is we meet at 8:00 at some specified place, and we walk and we talk.
Yeah.
And you wear comfortable clothes. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not trying to get anything from the other person.
Yeah.
And in politics and religion is okay.
Okay.
Because if we can't,
of course,
talk about something, then how are we interacting as people if there's some sort of like thing that we can't just agree, like, oh, okay, that's what you think. Okay, that's what I think. Oh, cool. Okay, I didn't think of it that way. Like, that's the conversation I want to have.
I want to pause right there because I think what you're saying as a philosopher is critical. Too far have we gone to saying it's taboo. It's taboo to say, I love you guys. What's wrong with that? Just because you say you love him doesn't mean there's a sexual connotation attached to that. Right. Exactly. I mean, there's 6 different types of love. You don't love your dog the same way you love your wife. Well, hopefully not. It's okay. Like, democracy was built on discussion, on different views, right?
Yeah.
I do not like Brussels sprouts. I don't. I really don't. My wife loves them. I still love her. Like, there's just this fear of conflict, or they feel that because we disagree, there's a conflict. Right. It's okay to have a different mindset. It's okay to be for a different political party, or you don't ask if you're a Democrat or Republican. Right. Of course, it defines you as a human being, right? I don't judge. If I use this analogy, if I go, how y'all doing? Right? Then all of these biases come in. Oh, Martin's from the South. Okay, so if he's from the South, he likes fried chicken. He likes this. He likes that. If I talk fast talking from New York, I like pizza. I like this. I like that. Yes, they're fundamental cultural behaviors that it's okay. You grew up in that area. It's okay to recognize people for their differences.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. I'll get off my soapbox. I think it's
agree,
important.
And I want to comment on the same thing. I think as a society, we have very much regressed into this like childlike black and white perspective on things. Right?
Agreed.
Right? Like, why are we so it's you're either all good or you're either with us or against us? Why can't it just be that this person has an opinion, that person has an opinion, and you know what? If you think those two people are exactly the same, I bet you if you talk to both of them, you'll find out they're actually quite different. Mm-hmm. And in a way, they're also quite the same and the same as you, right? So it's like things are way more nuanced. And I think that we would do ourselves a much better favor as a society if we would train ourselves to be aware of the nuances of individuals and people in groups of people, instead of trying to just assume everyone's all the same because you're in a particular category, right? Like,
hail to that, brother. Hail to that. Douchebags and idiots come in all size, shapes, forms, sex, color. There's stupidity is the least racist of all.
Right. You have to look at each person individually. Like, that's just the way that it is. Like, you know. Yeah.
And when I'm driving, everybody else is stupid, but I'm the stupid one.
yeah. You're the only one who can drive well, right? Am I the best driver there ever was? So I started doing these walk and talks with this idea in mind, that I wanted to be able to explore this with different people.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, and that was it. That was my new business model, which was completely the opposite of how I would normally approach a business model, because I normally would figure it all out, get a spreadsheet out, plan it. But I said, this is my new business model. I'm going to do walk and talks and see what happens. And the way that I get people to walk and talk with me is I just meet them somewhere and I find them interesting. I'll offer to do a walk and talk. And wouldn't you know that the 4th walk and talk I did, again, no expectation of anything turning into anything. It turned out that the guy was a entrepreneur who had about $100 million in hotel real estate. And this is before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he still does. Don't get me wrong. Still does, but there's been struggles. $100 million in hotel real estate. And we're just talking about stuff, and I'm sharing openly, and we start talking about business stuff, and then we move on to something else. And at the end of the conversation, he says, how would I get you to help me do that stuff that we talked about? I really liked what you said back there. How would you help me? And I said, I don't know. I didn't really think about that. I didn't immediately jump into, oh, well, here's my price and here's how this is going to work. So I just said, I don't really know. I'd love to help you. So why don't you just tell me what it's worth to you if we can do the thing that we said we were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he came back, a few days later, and he's like, I can pay you $8,000 a month for that. And I was like, okay. And honestly, that project took me a few hours a week, probably for about a 6 month. It was 6 months to get into COVID, and then we had another 6 months or more of other stuff we were dealing with. But my point is, I didn't put any effort into any of that in terms of setting it up. Of course, I put a lot of effort into trying to make the outcome that I wanted to provide value, because that's number one. How do you produce the most value? So it just kind of snowballed from there. And then, of course, COVID came. And then COVID gave me all sorts of new opportunities with this perspective, because my whole perspective was help entrepreneurs as if they were my businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had lots of people who I could help, because a lot of people needed help. They needed perspective. They needed investment. They needed whatever they needed at that particular time. And so, so 2020 was a crazy year, and it was a good year financially and relationship wise. And I helped people through things. And so that's what I do now. I'm a wandering philosopher, a wandering Kung Fu master, whatever you want to call it. and I help people where I can. It's like, I think of those old movies like Kung Fu, the one with David Carradine, or even like a more modern kind of version of that is Burn Notice, the one with where he's like a burn spy who just kind of helps people with different things.
I've never seen that one, but what's that title of the movie? Burn Notice?
Yeah, it's a TV series. It's just like a silly, it's like based in Miami. It's one of the reasons we moved to Florida. If I'm going to be honest, it's a dumb show, but it's funny. But the point is that those shows are all about like someone who just like listens to people's problems and then tries to help them through some adventure, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how the way I look at every single interaction that I have from that point forward was like, what does this adventure look like? And can I provide value? And there are times where people say, hey, I need help with this. And I say, I don't know how to help with that. Here, like maybe I can pass you off to someone else who does. I don't know. So how I got to that was I listened to myself, tied to our title. I listened to myself. I took the thing that I hated and made it go away. Like that might not be the solution for everyone. If you hate paying your bills, that recommendation may not be the best, but maybe it would be. So that's a belief, right?
I think there's different ways you can. If you hate paying your bills, just make sure there's money in the bank account and let somebody else pay your bills, right?
Whatever it is, exactly. There's always a different approach. That's an interesting point too. If you did let someone else pay your bills for you, how much energy do you waste? This is something that I always see. Entrepreneurs will spend our time doing those $20 an hour jobs for like 10 hours a week when they could be out doing whatever it is for $200, $500, $1,000, whatever plus hour. So then not to mention the other kind of less financial part of that is the psychological toll that the thing takes on you, which then has an opportunity cost associated with, well, if your brain is not in the game, or you keep finding yourself distracted or anxiety around something, that's sucking the energy out of you in a non-productive way. So if you can eliminate that or push yourself in a different direction, it's worth whatever it takes to get there, you know?
I'll tell you a story about a client of mine so most people hire Urgio as for us, right? So we go into businesses, and so often I'm similar to you. We don't do consultancy practice. We do integrated fractional chief operating officers or presidents, right? So
Perfect.
never
Yeah.
the CEO. We don't want the title. We want to get stuff done. And so we help and we look at behaviors and systems. And me and my partners, depending on the industry, we go in and we go, okay, here's some key behaviors that we need to change. Here's a code of conduct and here's a system. So we follow Tim Ferriss's DEAL: direction, elimination, automation, liberation, right? So that is something that's stuck with me for a long time since, 4-Hour Workweek came out. And so this guy makes a lot of money on a monthly basis, and younger person, and huge legal bill. And he's like, oh, well, I said, the lawyers aren't doing their job. You're just paying over and over. And then he flips out on a manager for spending $500.
Yeah.
And in his opinion, he's like, we should not spend that much on a cell phone, on a mobile phone, right? I said, well, we need devices. We need to test devices. We need to do this. We need to do that. But yet we're spending, in the amounts of 5,000 plus a month on legal fees that are not vetted or not valid. And you're like, okay, so you're wasting all of your neurons on really low impact. Because I always bring it back to risk management, right? So it's always, risk is a personal factor. Steve Jobs was a little bit riskier than others. You go, okay, what's accountants? Especially in the mining industry, there's a lot of CEOs who are risk adverse because they come from a very financial background, and they go, well, let's not take that risk. Let's not take that risk. So you evaluate the risk according to the organization. You move forward and you say, okay, here's your accountability. Here's my accountability. Here's how we lead the organization. But entrepreneurs tend to not want to let go of that minutia that they think we bring it back to this get shit done kind of attitude of, I can get it done. I can get it done. I can get it done. I can throw more hours at it, but it's just so not true. So
right. There's a great book that I read in my early Florida days by a guy named Rob Slee. He's an investment banker, and he wrote a book called Time Really Is Money. And it's basically, do you know it? It's actually about just increasing your hourly rate. Even though we don't work per hour like an employee does, we still have a certain amount of money we generate on an hourly basis. So how do we incrementally raise that up? And you can't skip levels. He's very clear about you have to do it incrementally. But the idea should always be, how do I spend my time and how am I maximizing the amount of money I'm making per hour?
Absolutely. That's the format that I strongly believe in. The difference between active income and passive income, right?
Right.
So having a practice, a lot of people say, well, I have a business. Well, no, you have a practice, especially with these new kids that like you said before, it's a buzzword, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a CEO. Do you know what a chief stands for? You actually have to lead people. That's what a chief stands for, right? Execution, you have to make sure that things get done. And officer, your name is attached to that legal document. So you are personally liable for the finance and the people of this organization. So think wisely before you choose to say, I'm the CEO of this company. It's frivolous. It's people don't, everybody wants to be a CEO.
Right.
Well, I shouldn't say that. Like, what CEOs talk about? yeah, you're a CEO.
Yeah.
Shooting myself, cannibalizing my own show.
The title doesn't mean anything. It's the output that matters, right?
Agreed.
Like everybody's got to relax on the titles and it's like, and even within an organization, there's a certain amount of it's helpful to have titles to kind of understand how people interact with each other. But at the end of the day, it's like a football team or something. It's like it has to do with how the team plays together.
Correct.
Not what role everybody has, right?
I agree. So with that said, Dan, so we've come full circle. I loved it. It went like, I was like, are we getting there? Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there. So listen to yourself. So how would you, in like a sales pitch, because I know you hate sales. So give me an elevator pitch for finding your path. How do you find yourself? Can you synthesize it? So you're talking, you've got kids, right? So manipulate that, saying, okay, if this was the last thing you'd say to them, how would you say it?
So I would probably say that if you're going to find your path by listening and how to listen to yourself, how you listen to yourself is by how you feel, not how you think. Because the thing that you feel is the thing you should think about. Maybe that's a good way to say it. Like when you get that pain, like that seems like every time this comes up, I get this pain, like physical pain, like or emotional pain, or however it manifests in you. That's your clue. That's what you should be listening to. Because the other thing that we have a tendency to do that we don't listen to is we know what we should be doing 99% of the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
We know exactly. With your example with the $500 phone and the like doing the wrong things and all that sort of stuff, he knows that. He does. Like you could point it out to him 20 times. He already knows it. I know all the things I should be doing right now that I'm not doing. So the question is, either I have to make it so those things don't matter anymore, kind of like the way that I adjusted my sales process, or you have to focus on it because you know that now that's the thing I need to work on, and then I have to do that in a way that makes that pain go away, because I don't think you can. Well, you could if you wanted to. I guess you could do that your whole life, but like we're both in our middle-aged time, right? So I remember a time when I was younger. I'll remember a time when I'm younger now, when I'm older. When I'm older and I look back, I don't think I want to have 20 years of kind of like awfulness, right? Like,
agreed.
I want to have 20 years of thinking about how wonderful everything was and the people and the relationships I've had, because that stuff's important to me. Whatever's important to you is different maybe, but that's important to me. And that's where I focus my attention on how to reconcile the stuff I should be, quote unquote, should be focusing on because I'm needing to adjust it for myself, and how that aligns with where I'm going and what I need to do next.
Absolutely. I mean, I have a whole session on think, feel, do, right? So the behaviors are often moved by emotions, not by thought. It's that think, feel, do. A lot of people act on feelings where you should be reflective of the feeling.
That's right.
So taking consideration your feelings and then act upon it. So you have to bring it back, right? So think, feel, bring it back to think, and then go to do, right? That's
right. Exactly.
That's a lot of people go, it's okay. And I tell this to my boy. My boy's got some anger issues. He's super smart, and sometimes he doesn't know how to use his words, and he gets upset really quick. And I said, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to act in anger.
Right.
So it's okay if you're feeling angry. I get it. You've got a raging lion. I had anger issues. My father was an alcoholic, so I had anger issues. I took it out on other people, and I recognize the bad stuff that I've done. And so now I'm paying the price. So, but no. So my boy is kind of feeling the same way. I'm not an alcoholic at all. But I get how he's feeling inside. So it's okay to understand your emotions. It's not okay to act out. And same thing if you're sad or if you're scared, Brene Brown's got this thing about courage and vulnerability, and it matches. So that's very important. Dan, what, leaders are learners, and you are constantly learning. What's the thing that you are learning now? Because it also demonstrates an area that you want to improve on. So what are you looking at improving, and what are you looking at learning now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So something that I identified a couple of years back is something that was, again, entrepreneurs go into the world with I can do this attitude, and they don't really need a lot of information to start, which is great. That's one of our strengths. And I'm no exception to that. I do that well. One of the things I identified for myself was I didn't have a formal finance background. I just sort of learned by doing, and I did okay learning by doing. But so I'm in the process of completing a master's in finance degree. I'm not to say that everyone. I'm not a like, hey, you have to do academics. That's the only way to learn. By no means. You learn however you learn best is perfect. That's the best way.
From the guy who got homeschooled. So
right. Exactly. Do whatever works for you. That's what you do. Yeah. So, but I'm currently working on a master's in finance degree. because I found that the formal finance education filled in a lot of gaps that I had. From like, because I was, from my experience, I got so far, and it was literally gaps, because I've taken classes where I'm like, oh yeah, I know all that stuff, and I know all this stuff up here, but all that stuff in the middle, I didn't really understand what was going on. I like, tell me that again,
Yeah.
So it's like, so finance has been good for me, and then also I really do love kind of the macroeconomic discussions that have come out of the finance degree, and that's why now my next thing is a master's in economics, because I think that, again, as entrepreneurs, we get very focused, and this is one of the values that I provide to the companies that I invest in and that I work with, because I take all this information and I synthesize it and I bring it to their specific situation, right? So we don't pay attention as entrepreneurs, I think, as much as we could, into kind of like the macro level stuff. Like finance, the finance world is very good, like you were saying, at risk management, being aware of all that stuff. Entrepreneurs don't pay any attention to that 9 times out of 10, right? So I think that as a species of entrepreneurs, we can benefit from taking some of those more formal, rigorous kind of finance and macroeconomic perspectives,
methodologies,
into our business and into our decision making.
Agreed. Yeah, that's, like I said before, for me it's all risk based, right? So what's it going to impact? People, environment, assets, reputation. So those 4 categories in a simple 3x4. What's the likelihood? And what's the probability and the impact? And you go, okay, yeah, here's what we need. This we don't touch. Well, okay, if something happens here, we're really hooped. So how can we mitigate or prepare for that event, right? And we kind of analyze that and then build behaviors around that. So good. Is there one last question here? What is the resource of choice? What is the one thing? So I grew up with Stephen Covey. So that the 7 Habits was for me the biggest thing that I still apply to this day. Stoicism is a key component of my personal philosophy. 7 Habits is something that I've grown up with and still to this day apply. What about you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I know the answer right off the top of my head. It's a book called The Goal. The guy who wrote its last name is Goldratt, and it's about the theory of constraints. I alluded to the theory of constraints earlier in one of my answers to one of the questions. The theory of constraints gave birth to kind of lean manufacturing as like a concept. But if you read the book and you really think about it from like a philosophical, personal perspective, the constraint in any process or system, or in a process, can be your thought process, or the constraint can be your relationship amongst a group of people. Like, you can apply it very broadly and very philosophically. And so that's my go-to thing. I'm always aware of, like, what's the constraint? What's the constraint?
I've never read that book, so I will add that to my list. So thank you very much.
It's an easy read too, because it's kind of a narrative, like parable type format.
Good. Fabulous. Thank you. Are you okay if people reach out?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, how do we get a hold of you?
You're in Florida.
Walk and talk, in Florida. I would definitely fly to Florida. It's quite nice here, but I definitely fly down to Florida and come and see and walk and talk. So 2021, one of our goals that Dan, you and I.
For sure, absolutely.
So we'll put your contact details below, LinkedIn, I'm assuming, and stuff like that. So
yeah, perfect. Yeah, and if you reach out on LinkedIn, give me a few days. Sometimes I don't check LinkedIn as much as I should, but from LinkedIn, you'll be able to find all my email and all that. So send me an email or whatever. So I'm easy to get hold of.
Sounds good. Fabulous. Thank you very much for being on the show, Dan. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. With that said, my name is Martin Hunter. I am the host. Oh, God, I always forget. My marketing team's going to kill me again. Every episode, I have to say, please like, subscribe. You get it. Okay. With that said, my name is Martin Hunter. I'm the host of the show, What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategy into frontline operations. Thank you very much for listening and watching.
Thanks for tuning in to What CEOs Talk About. Make sure to click subscribe to get notified about future episodes or check us out at www.whatceostalkabout.com.